We're hanging out here at East Coast Gear Supply. I'm here with Chase, owner-operator, and we thought, you know what, we're looking at axles all day. This would be a great time to just talk about all the different sizes of axles and what upgrades East Coast has for them. So let's start at the end here. Factory JK, right? This is what we're going to see most of the guys driving around with.
Correct. Yep, this certainly isn't all the options, but here's some brief options. Here's Dana 44 or Dana 30 JK, inner C, same C. Here's the knuckle. Here's our upgraded version of the C. As you can see, a lot thicker, beefed up. Obviously, people have had instances where ball joints will spread, ruin the C, ruin your housing, that sort of thing. So we've also increased the tube size that the C's go on. So factory 2.5 quarter wall tube. We're building with 3-inch half wall. So C to accommodate much stronger, bigger tube so we can beef up that housing. And then there's obviously some upgraded knuckle options. This is a reed one. This is just one we pulled, but much thicker webbing in here and all those good things. So if you are going to upgrade to a 44, there's some options to make that the best 44 you can get.
So this would be for someone who's like, hey, I'm just going to run a 35. I don't want to buy new tires, buy new wheels. I just want a better axle for the front of my truck. So you have a 44 to fit that hole.
Correct. Yeah. So, you know, our recommendation kind of for the 44 series is a 35-inch tire, perfectly fine. You can give it the business. If you start getting into 37, then axle shaft U-joint become your weakness because it's a unit bearing axle. You're, you know, stuck on having a needle bearing style U-joint like a Dana U-joint. That's going to be your failure point
because there's no lockout available.
Correct. Yeah. And if you go to the lockout, kind of the kit that there is some free spin kit, but it doesn't really upgrade you much, and that still becomes your failure point. So the unit bearing itself is okay, but the U-joint becomes a problem. So if you're going over 35, going into a 37, think about RCVs.
Okay.
RCVs can spin all the time. You don't have to worry about the U-joint. And then 44 with 37 is perfectly fine. You know, our housing, the CN, the ring and pinion, that will all hold up to your 37.
But now we want to move up to, so someone's like, I'm going to 1-ton swap my Jeep. And this used to be kind of like the gold standard, right? The Kingpin Dana 60.
Some would say that. So if you get over a 37-inch tire and you start to get into the 40s, 40s is like a really tricky tire because it's not that big, but it's big enough to break, you know, any 44 series type components. You'll start having ring and pinion issues, that sort of stuff. So we're going to move from a 44 into a 60. And then our 60 specifically, we run a Kingpin 60. And we do that because, you know, we believe the wheel end kit is the strongest in this size. So we got a Kingpin knuckle, Kingpin C. You can see the difference just in the thickness of, you know, materials used. You're not going to bend this.
Yeah.
Good luck. Also, we're increasing the tube size again on the housing. So this is going to be a 3.5 half wall or 7/16 wall, your choice. So we'll build the Dana 60 Kingpins, and this is like 40-inch tire. But again, this is 40-inch tires. You're going to wheel it.
Yeah.
And you're going to hammer it hard. So with this Kingpin setup, you know, we get away from the traditional, or I call it traditional now because unit bearings have been around for so long, but we're actually kind of going back to old technology.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Non-unit bearing, live spindle. So now we've got loose bearings that we can re-grease, repack, reset preloads on, and or replace for $25.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussions about Kingpin versus ball joint. And realistically, you're still going to service them equally. But the Kingpin, if you maintain a Kingpin, your only service is maybe grease versus ball joints.
Correct. And if you have a wheel bearing go bad or something like that, it's a very cheap fix versus a unit bearing is more expensive. And the whole idea around, you know, kind of ball joints and unit bearings in the OE is it's much faster from a production standpoint to install ball joints, to install unit bearing. Bearing comes, bolts on, you're done. Whereas, you know, we're packing bearing, we're setting preloads, all these things. So initially, it takes much longer to build an axle like this, and that's why the OE has gone away from it. But from a strength and replaceability standpoint, This is stronger, and it's cheaper to, you know, maintain, replace
in the long term. So that's your Dana 60 crate axle Kingpin. But now this is the new badness, right? This is the KP540.
That's right. So Kingpin 540 got developed because the Kingpin is a 1480 U-joint, right? So once you get past the 40-inch tire, you go to a 43. You're going to want to run, you know, a billet U-joint, non-needle bearing, like a super joint or a Brannock joint, CTM, something like that. But also 35 spline is as large as you can go as far as an outer stub. Now, you might see, oh, there's 40 spline stuff available for this old Kingpin. We do not build that way, and we don't recommend it because they thin this spindle out to get the 40 spline shaft in there, and you're going to end up having spindle bending problems and things like that.
Yeah, because what they're doing is basically enlarging this space to fit the 40 spline outer inside that spindle.
Correct.
And that's just making this wall thinner and thinner and thinner.
Correct. And that thin wall, like this is a well-balanced setup for a 35 spline shaft. Good. Again, you can run RCVs in this. You can run better U-joints in it. And you can get into that 43-inch tire class on this successfully. But then your failure point becomes the stub shaft. If you go to the good U-joints or RCVs, you're going to pop stub shafts because they're only 35 spline.
And the way to eliminate that is to go to a 40 spline.
Yeah.
And this is the right way to do it.
Correct. So now we're like, okay, we have to do 40 spline to keep up with kind of what the market's doing today. Because, I mean, a lot of people building buggies now, 43 stickies is a norm.
That's a regular tire. Yeah.
And if you put a healthy motor on 43 stickies, this is going to be hard to keep together with a 35 spline shaft. So now 40 spline, we have the bigger 1550 U-joint, and we say, okay, we're going to design 40 spline. So what do? We just make a spindle big enough to take a 40 spline shaft? No, we look at the whole wheel end kit and we say, how do we make this for the next generation of 43-inch sticky tires, high horsepower, and, you know, hammer down. So we increase the spread on this C. We add a lot of material here so we don't have to worry about any of this bending. We increase the spread on the knuckle, which gives it a much better load capacity. We increase the size of the bolt and the physical spread of the bolt that the spindle bolts to, because as you spread, that spreads the load across this knuckle face. We increase the bearing separation here. We increase the size of these bearings so they'll carry more weight and more load. We increase the wall thickness of this spindle and the OD. So increasing the OD of any tube is the greatest strength advantage. So like, even if we're talking about DOM, if you just increase thickness versus if you went from a 3.5 to 4 inch. So that OD is a huge difference in strength, but you also, not only did we maintain the wall thickness of this, we actually increased the wall thickness of the spindle and increased the OD. So
you get a thicker wall, even though you're running a 40 spline shaft.
Correct. So thicker wall spindle, not thinner, 40 spline, better bearing separation, which again spreads the load across the spindle, transfers some of the load back into the knuckle, and we just balance this entire system. And when we say balance, we're balancing for you to launch this thing as hard as you possibly can,
yeah,
and get after it. And so when that impact happens, where do all these forces go?
Yeah. So there you go. You got a JK looking to run 35s, or maybe you got that ultimate buggy and you want 43s or bigger.
Yeah.
Or bigger.
We got some 46s out there.
This is where you want to be.